It wasn't locked in a vault. It wasn't behind laser grids. But to one family, it was more valuable than anything else in the world. And in late 2024, it disappeared. To understand the loss, we have to go back 5 decades. To a man who rode into Olympic history, not just for his country, but for something greater. Richard Meade wasn't just an equestrian. He was a champion of precision, poise, and absolute control, qualities that earned him the spotlight at a time when Britain desperately needed an Olympic hero. In Munich, under the cloud of a rising Cold War and political tension, Meade led the British eventing team with calm authority. He didn't just win, he dominated. First in team eventing, then again in the individual competition. 2 gold medals on foreign soil in a year marked by tragedy. That same Olympics saw one of the darkest days in sports history. In a year of heartbreak, Meade's triumph became a flicker of hope, a reminder of what the Games were meant to be. Those 2 medals would become more than awards. They became family heirlooms, symbols of discipline, resilience, and national pride. Stored in the Meade family home in South Gloucestershire, the medals were displayed not as trophies, but as totems. Angela Meade, Richard's wife, once described them as echoes of a time when discipline meant something, when legacy was earned in mud and sweat. They weren't guarded with alarms. They weren't hidden away. Because to the Meades, the value wasn't in their price, it was in their story. But there was a shadow that trailed these medals, one that even time couldn't quite shake. In the 1980s, those very medals had once been stolen. It happened while they were on loan for an exhibition. There were no alarms then either. Just a break-in, a case cracked, and 2 missing symbols of history. Weeks later, after a public plea and media storm, the medals were returned, damaged, scratched, altered forever. One had been shaved to test if it was truly gold. It wasn't. Like all modern Olympic medals, it was mostly silver. What the thieves didn't understand was that they hadn't just taken metal. They'd taken memory. After the medals were recovered, the family tightened security, but only slightly. Because, really, who would come for them again? Richard Meade passed away in 2015. But by then, his legacy had grown far beyond podiums. He was more than an Olympian. He was a symbol of a different age, an age where you earned what you displayed. Angela kept the medals where they'd always been. On the wall, framed, simple, not locked up, because that wasn't Richard's way. His children, now grown, visited often. His story lived through them. The home became a place where Olympic pride met quiet family dinners. Until late October 2024. It began quietly. No alarms. No smashed glass. Just a strange silence. Angela Meade returned home after a short trip away. Everything seemed untouched until she entered the sitting room. The medals were gone. So were several antique trophies. Jewelry. Keepsakes. No sign of forced entry. No obvious mess. But something was wrong, deeply wrong. She called the police. To the outside world, it was just another burglary. But to Angela, it was something else. They didn't just take medals. They took Richard. They took a piece of him. In that moment, the family legacy shattered again, quietly, but devastatingly. The medals weren't just metal. They were memory, weight, history. And they were gone. But this wasn't random. This wasn't reckless. It was fast, clean, precise, almost practiced. And the most chilling part? These medals had disappeared before. But this time they might never come back. Like, subscribe, and turn on the notification button as we step inside the house and uncover what the burglars left behind. October 31st, 2024. A house once filled with laughter now held its breath. And inside, what Angela Meade didn't realize yet was that the story of the missing gold medals was just beginning. Wasn't thinking about danger when she walked through the front door that afternoon. The front hall looked normal. The sitting room looked normal. But it was the details, the unsettling stillness, the misplaced photo frame, the faint scent of disturbed air that told her something was wrong. Angela's footsteps echoed through rooms that should have felt familiar, but didn't. It wasn't until she looked at the wall, where Richard's medals had hung for nearly 50 years, that the silence cracked open. The medals were gone. Along with them, several smaller trophies, a Victorian-era brooch, and her grandmother's wedding ring. Angela dialed 999 with shaking hands. Within minutes, 2 officers from the Avon and Somerset police arrived. They treated it like what it seemed, a straightforward burglary. But as they moved through the house, noting items missing and others untouched, something didn't add up. No broken locks. No smashed windows. No signs of forced entry. Whoever had come knew what they were looking for, and they knew how to get it. A forensic team was called in. Fingerprints were dusted. Footage from neighboring properties' security cameras was requested. Still, nothing obvious emerged. The Meade house wasn't a fortress. It wasn't meant to be. It was a sprawling country home where memories lived in every corridor. Angela's kitchen still had the same worn oak table Richard used to sit at, planning eventing strategies. His boots still stood by the door, mud long turned to dust. And above the fireplace had been Richard's medals, simple, humble, powerful. The thieves hadn't just stolen gold. They had rifled through a life lived openly, honestly, and now vulnerably. And that vulnerability struck harder than any physical damage could have. The investigators compiled a list. 2 1972 Olympic gold medals, an antique trophy from an equestrian event, several pieces of jewelry, family heirlooms. But strangely, several valuable items had been left behind. Angela's late husband's Rolex watch sat untouched. Rare artworks still hung on the walls. Cash was left in a drawer. It wasn't a smash and grab. It wasn't an amateur job. This was deliberate, specific, calculated. The medals were the primary target. The question was, why? One chilling realization came quickly. This wasn't the first time. Back in the 1980s, when the medals were stolen during an exhibition, it had taken a public outcry and a media blitz to bring them back. The police never identified the thief. Now, decades later, it seems someone remembered. Memories fade. Mistakes don't. And whoever had taken the medals once or heard about their worthlessness then knew exactly where to look now. The medals themselves, despite being gold in color, weren't solid gold. Olympic medals post-1912 were largely made of silver, coated with a thin layer of pure gold. Their material value? Maybe a few $100s. Their emotional value? Incalculable. The thief either didn't know that or didn't care. Angela Meade stood in her living room days later, speaking softly to a news camera. Angela's somber voice. They didn't just steal medals. They stole the feeling of him still being here with us. Behind her, empty spaces on the wall seemed to echo the loss. The medals weren't just trophies. They were anchors. To a time, to a man, to a country that once cheered as one. And now they were gone. The question was no longer just who took them. It was how they got in and why they had chosen now. Now, let's follow the investigation. The missing frames, the footprints, and the first big clue that changed everything. 2 weeks after the medals vanished, police thought they had reached a dead end. No witnesses, no noise, no fingerprints. But then, a neighbor came forward with something that changed everything. It was a small, almost forgotten doorbell camera across the lane. At 3:47 p.m., just minutes before Angela Meade returned home, the camera had captured a figure, hooded, moving briskly, crossing the property line. Not running, not sneaking, walking. It wasn't panic. It wasn't amateurism. Whoever this was, they were calm, controlled, like they had done this before. The figure's face was never seen. Their build was average. No distinctive features. But they had made a crucial mistake, leaving traces behind. Police re-examined the property with fresh eyes. In the back garden, beneath a crumbling brick wall, they found it. A single partial footprint, boot tread, size 9. Slight scuff marks near the utility window. A minute piece of black fabric snagged on the frame. No forced entry marks. No smashed glass. The conclusion? An unlocked window. Angela, heartbroken, admitted the truth. She often left that small window cracked open during the warmer fall afternoons. The thief didn't need to break in. The door, metaphorically, had already been left ajar. Piecing together Angela's timeline, investigators determined the window of opportunity had been less than 90 minutes. Angela left at 2:15 p.m. The figure was captured at 3:47 p.m. Angela returned by 4:05 p.m. Whoever did this wasn't just lucky. They knew her routine. Or they watched. And they waited. Neighbors were questioned. No one reported strangers. No strange vehicles. No loud noises. It was the perfect silent crime. Detectives began building profiles. Was it an opportunistic burglar who stumbled on a valuable find? A collector who knew exactly where the medals were? Or someone from the past, someone with a connection to Richard Meade's name and history? Some theorized that the theft wasn't random at all, that it was commissioned. In the underworld of illicit collectors, Olympic memorabilia can fetch staggering black market prices, especially pieces tied to emotionally charged history. If true, this wasn't just theft. It was art theft, history theft. And it was personal. Here's the irony. The medals themselves, largely silver under their thin gold plating, were nearly worthless to melt down. Their value lay entirely in the engraving of the 1972 games, the historical connection to Meade's victories, the story they told. Without documentation or public sale, they were nearly impossible to move. So why take them? Police had two theories. The thief was ignorant of their real value and had already disposed of them for a fraction of their worth. Or worse, someone wanted them not to sell, but simply to own, to hoard the untouchable. Searches at local pawn shops, antique dealers, and online auction houses turned up nothing. No medals, no brooch, no antique trophy, just silence. Angela, growing increasingly desperate, made a second public plea. Please, these medals aren't about money. They're about family, about memory. Please return them. No questions asked. The plea went viral, but the medals stayed gone. But behind the scenes, investigators had begun piecing together an even darker theory. What if the break-in wasn't just about medals, but about something far more valuable? Keep watching as we follow the trail underground, into the shadowy world where Olympic dreams and priceless memories can be bought and sold. While Angela Meade hoped for the thief's conscience to stir, detectives began following another path. A path paved with whispered trades, hidden collections, and a chilling truth. Not all stolen treasures are meant to be found. In the underworld of black market collectors, medals like Richard Meade's carried value beyond money. These weren't bought with public auctions or gallery viewings. They changed hands in silence, in back rooms, among those obsessed not with ownership, but with control over history itself. For the right price, someone could own a moment of Olympic triumph, a piece of glory stolen not just from a man, but from a nation's memory. It wasn't about display. It was about possession, about erasing the story from the world and keeping it for oneself. Detectives contacted experts in stolen art and historic property. Whispers surfaced. A private collector based in Eastern Europe was seeking rare Olympic memorabilia. A dealer in Lisbon rumored to have untouchable inventory. A secret online auction operating in the dark web listing golden glory, private acquisition only. But nothing concrete, nothing provable. It was like chasing ghosts. Every lead evaporated into rumor. Every name dissolved into silence. And time was slipping away. In cases like this, the longer an item stayed missing, the less likely it would ever be recovered. Then, a surprising breakthrough came from the past. Detectives revisited the 1980s theft of the same medals, the exhibition heist that had been quietly buried over time. One name stood out: Gareth Dunwood, a low-level criminal turned antiques trafficker, arrested in 1987 for attempting to sell stolen war medals at an underground market in London. He had served time, disappeared after his release. But now, an interesting coincidence. Gareth Dunwood's last known address was just 30 miles from Angela Meade's home. His son, Lee Dunwood, was active in local property maintenance. Lee Dunwood had access to properties. He knew which homes were vulnerable. And he had a criminal record for minor burglaries, though nothing as daring as this. Until now, police quietly put Lee Dunwood under surveillance. He worked odd hours, had no stable address, spent cash, not cards. And more troubling, he was spotted frequenting antique fairs, flea markets, and pawn shops, not selling, but asking. Asking about medals, Olympic memorabilia, historic artifacts. He wasn't looking to buy. He was looking to learn what these things were worth before he moved them. And every day that passed, the trail grew colder. In a desperate move, police set up a sting. An undercover officer posed as a black market buyer, circulating whispers about purchasing historical medals, no questions asked. It took weeks. Finally, a bite. A message slipped through, anonymous, cautious, asking for a meeting at a roadside cafe on the edge of Bristol. The wording was vague. No direct admissions. But it was enough. It was a risk. A gamble. But in the game of shadows, sometimes one light is all you need. The day of the meeting arrived. Hidden cameras, plainclothes officers, nerves tight as piano wire. A man arrived, baseball cap pulled low, hoodie up. It wasn't Lee Dunwood. It wasn't Gareth. It was someone else entirely. Someone with knowledge of the medals, their value, their story, their emotional power. But no medals in hand. The good news? They had found someone connected to the underground network. The bad news? It meant the medals had already changed hands again. And worse, maybe they were already overseas, lost forever. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification for more chilling true crime stories like this one. Let's move on to the final chase, the confrontation, and the heartbreaking revelation about what really happened to Richard Meade's medals. Because sometimes when you chase the past, you find it's already gone. By the time the police closed in, it was already too late. The medals, symbols of a lifetime of sacrifice, of a nation's pride, had vanished into a world where memory could be bought and history could be erased. The man caught in the sting wasn't a mastermind. He was a courier, a middleman. Under questioning, the truth slowly emerged. The medals had been traded privately, not for cash, but as part of a larger deal involving stolen art. They were seen as a bonus, an added prize. By the time he had heard of them, the medals were already on a boat, bound for collectors overseas. No names, no locations, just one chilling detail. The buyer wasn't planning to resell them. They would vanish into a private vault, locked away, unseen by the world, possibly forever. Richard Meade's legacy, traded like a trinket, lost to shadows. When police broke the news to Angela Meade, it wasn't a recovery. It was a funeral. No medals, no closure, just loss. Angela stood on her porch, overlooking the quiet countryside where she had grown up under her father's shadow of greatness. They weren't just metal. They were him. Photographs could be replaced. Memories could be retold. But the weight, the feel of those medals in hand was gone. Stolen. Not just from Angela. From everyone who remembered that golden day in 1972. When news of the loss broke to the public, outrage followed. Historic societies condemned the theft as a crime against national memory. Olympic officials offered condolences, but admitted there was little they could do. A few well-meaning collectors came forward, offering similar medals in donation. But it wasn't the same. You can't replace a lifetime. You can't forge history. Some losses are final. Angela politely declined the offers. Her father's medals weren't commodities. They were his life and hers. In the months that followed, one uncomfortable truth became clear. The theft had only been possible because of a society that placed material value on memory, that turned history into collectibles, to be hoarded rather than shared. The medals were priceless because of their story. And now, the story was the only thing left. But maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Angela launched a campaign in her father's memory. A traveling exhibit honoring 1972's forgotten athletes. speaking engagements about preserving public history, and a small, modest plaque placed at their family home. A reminder, glory isn't in the gold. It's in the lives we touch and the memories we leave behind. Cut back to the rainy countryside. The medals are gone. The thief is still unnamed. The buyer unknown. But Richard Meade's name lives on, in stories, in memories, in every child who dreams of standing atop a podium one day. The past can be stolen, but memory? Memory endures. In the end, it wasn't the medals that mattered. It was the meaning. And meaning can never be stolen. Fade out to black, as soft Olympic fanfare echoes faintly in the distance.